It is on.
All right, we're gonna call to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here. They're letting me start this meeting, so. We'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we need to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0, did I do okay?
That's it. I think that's the form right now.
And now we will swear in our new trustees. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Cindy. I do swear that I support the Constitution of the United States.
I do.
Okay.
Swear. Support the Constitution of the United States
The Constitution and the laws of the state of Idaho,
and the laws of the state of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully discharge all duties of the office
that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the office
of trustee of Middleton School District number 134
of trustee of Middleton School District number 134
in Canyon County, state of Idaho,
Canyon County, state of Idaho,
according to the best of my ability.
to the best of my abilities.
Thank you. Jay? I do swear that I support the Constitution of the United States,
I do swear that I support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and the laws of the state of Idaho,
the Constitution and the laws of the state of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the office
that I will faithfully discharge all the duties of the office
of trustee of Middleton School District number 134
of trustee of Middleton School District number 134
in Canyon County, state of Idaho,
in Canyon County, state of Idaho,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Welcome.
You get to pick your seat, so
Is this where we go? Or
Yeah,
I should have went around.
either way.
either way.
Thanks.
Now you're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, that works.
All right, we will move on with the organization of the board. We'll make a call for nomination of the elected board officers. I will make a call for the election of a chairperson. Any motions?
I move that we elect or appoint or nominate Pam for the chairperson.
I second it.
Any discussion?
Sounds good.
Any sympathy? All in favor?
Aye.
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 You have to call for opposed just in case, just to make it.
Any opposed? But it was unanimous, wasn't it?
Yeah, get here. I'm deaf.
All right, let's call for a motion for vice chair.
I'd make a motion that Jake Dempsey be the vice chair.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That carries 5-0. Our treasurer is usually Alicia. Are you okay with that again? All in favor? Aye?
There would need to be a motion.
No? Oh, make a motion, sorry.
Move that we nominate Alicia
Good job.
as the treasurer.
I second it.
It's okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All not in favor? Did you say aye? I didn't hear you.
Sorry,
Carries 5-0.
busy afternoon.
And do we need to make a motion for you too? Okay.
Well,
I make a motion that
Gina?
Yeah.
Gina Corrigan be the board clerk.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, Gina.
Sorry.
And then the code of ethics is our next thing on there. There should be one right next to you.
Okay.
Okay. We just sign them and pass them in.
Yep.
They are on the board packet if you have questions and you want to see what we're signing. We're basically saying we will not lead you all astray. And if we do, you can hold us accountable. Thanks.
I just had a couple of questions about it.
Go ahead.
Who wrote it? The Board of Ethics, Code of Ethics document?
Typically that comes from the.
I believe it's from ISBA.
Okay. Okay, I just haven't had a chance to really review that. My concern would be that would in any way hamstring our ability to make decisions with our absolute discretion. And of course, if the issue is yes, what would be ethical, of course, but I just want to
Oh, you're okay.
deliberate that language a little bit first, so.
Yeah, so you'll just hold on and then he can just deliver that to Gina
Yes,
at his discretion.
that is totally fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Jay. And have you guys had a chance to look at the meetings,
The meeting schedule.
the meeting schedule?
Yes.
Is there any discussion?
I would move to amend the schedule with an exception of this next month landing on the 7th instead of the 14th.
So February, we would move it
February's
to the
meeting would be
7th.
The 7th instead of the 14th.
Are you guys,
No,
None.
Oh, not, is that the
So
reason?
as to avoid the
Yes.
wrath of my wife, if nothing else.
and other significant others.
so then we would want to make a motion to approve that with the exception.
You would approve this with the exception of the one date.
Yes.
Can we move next January's to the 10th? So we can watch
We
the
can.
national championship game?
Yes, we
This has
can.
happened 2 years in a row.
That's okay.
That's really looking ahead.
But that's okay.
I was wondering about how many people are going to be upset about that tonight.
Okay, so the motion would be
Maybe, to the 10th.
approve the schedule with the exception of February the 7th being in place of the 14th and next January's
Which would be a Tuesday.
meeting,
Yeah.
moving it to the January the 10th, which would be a Tuesday.
Who knows, it might be voice to save plan.
I know, right? You gotta have that plan.
Those are some
Is
high
that a
hopes,
motion,
but,
right?
That's a motion.
I'll second the motion.
okay. Any discussion? You guys all okay with that?
Yes, I am.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Was there a second?
Yes,
Yeah,
Derek,
Derek,
second. All right. And then I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I had some questions about it, but is that something that I do later?
No,
or-
Now,
No,
now.
no.
Or should I talk to the person that works on the budget?
Yep,
We-
Alicia's here.
now is-
Yeah, we are.
Now is perfectly
Yeah.
good.
I have
questions
too
all
many
the time.
questions.
Okay, well, if there are any specific questions to this part, the particular reports that came out or the process that was used, Alicia is here to answer any questions. If,
Alicia.
she's in the
Right in the
back.
back corner. Come on up.
If there are others, if you would prefer to hold your questions and have it set a meeting to meet with Alicia to kind of go through that, that would be appropriate as
I
well.
think I'd rather do that,
Okay,
Okay,
And if
because I
could
have
be-
so many.
Is it okay if I'm part of that?
of
Yes.
course, anytime.
Yeah.
How many constitutes a quorum? 3?
3. So the two of
Yeah,
them.
you're good.
Yeah.
Two,
That would be
us
great.
Be all right.
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
That'll help us get up to speed where we kind of missed out.
It takes a while.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So you would still though you'd want to go through that consent agenda to approve or deny the consent agenda for this month.
And we have a first and a second, correct?
Right,
So,
just the vote.
and no more discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And we will move on to discussion items. We have a good news story, and I think
Yeah.
Lisa's gonna do that, or
No,
you?
I'm gonna do that.
Okay, very good.
So a lot of times we talk about some of the big things that happen within the school system, the big accomplishments, and I just wanted to share one. It's kind of a smaller thing, but it's, I think, indicative of what goes on in schools all the time. And so about a month ago or 2 months ago, I got an email from a former student of Middleton a long time ago. I believe she attended high school in the 60s at Middleton High School. Her name was Carol Gabika. Some of you might have known her. Anyway, she said she had written a book, and in that book, she had dedicated the book partially to one of her teachers at Middleton High School. And so she said, beyond a number of other dedications here, she said, "To Mrs. Freeman, my English teacher at Middleton High School, Middleton, Idaho, who somehow convinced this secretly shy girl that she could write." So it was an English teacher, and which I thought was very nice. And she sent us a copy of the book that we'll take up to the high school. But Lori in the office here wanted to find out more about the story, and kind of what's the rest of the story. And so she looked up Mrs. Freeman, all the Freemans that had worked for the school district, and found this particular teacher that had worked during that time that Carol was at school, had been here for 2 years as an English teacher, and then there was no other record. And I was just going to leave it at that. But Lori took it a step further and actually found Diane Freeman, who was a volunteer librarian up in Nez Perce. And she had long since retired. Her husband had retired, and they'd moved up there. But we called Diane and let her know that had that dedication made to her. And for Diane, it was a neat thing to know. She knew Carol right off. When I said, "Do you remember someone named Carol McGee?" And she said, "Absolutely." Found out that Diane, after she had stopped teaching to raise her family. And after she stopped teaching, they stayed here in Middleton, and actually she ran the Gazette through the late 90s. She was the one responsible for publishing the Middleton Gazette. And so, again, just kind of a neat story of the kind of things that happen. And those kind of things that, Diane Freeman, I'm sure, did not think, I'm going to inspire Carol Gabika to write a book 40 years down the road. But she made have that impact, and that kind of impact is happening all the time with our teachers. And I just think that's it was a special story, I thought it was important to share it. So anyway,
Thank you.
Yes.
we'll have that up in the library up in the high school.
Very good.
Yeah.
Moving on to the MHS track resurfacing proposal. I believe Mr. Ankney is here to.
Yep, and just as a clarification from one of the emails I sent, I had said that we would be recommending a particular, but for tonight, what the request is to put out to bid. These are proposals,
To allow you to,
quotes that have been given. So the action that you'd be looking at is to authorize the school district to enter into that bidding process for the track resurfacing. So I'll let Mr. Ankney go through.
Thanks. So this is something that's been in discussion for the past few years at different levels. When you look at an all-weather, all-purpose track like we have, it should be resurfaced every 7 to 8 years. We're getting close to year 10 on it. And the reason they need this to take place, and if you do it in that rhythm, one of these tracks can easily last 30 to 40 years. If you let the surface on it get too worn down or misplaced, you start affecting what's underneath the track itself. And once that gets messed up, now you're talking a project that's in the millions of dollars to fix. So it is extremely important to resurface them. Right now, the rubber granules, the pebbles out there, they're wear and thin. And we host 3, regular season state track or track meets a year. Then we're also the host of the 3A, 2A, and 1A state track meet, which is great for our community. To have that many people coming into town, and it's great for the high school as well, so we have an opportunity to earn some extra money for athletics through concessions. So when you look at the track itself, it needs to be done. That's not a if, but it's a need. It needs to be done. I think one of the big questions to look at, and you guys saw the quotes that are in there. One of the individuals who goes by the track doctor, he's actually done some repair work on our track over the past few years. We've had to redo our runways, for the long jump, the triple jump, and the pole vault. They've come out and repainted some lines as well, just to make sure we can have the pop we need. But the price levels are and can be all over the map with this, and one of the reasons we need to put it out to bid. But when you look at it, one of the things to really discuss is what color do we want it to be, right? If you go all black compared to blue, you're saving, depending on what quote you looked at in there, you're saving $40,000, $50,000. One of the cool designs that I have seen is an all black track, but the relay exchange zones are a different color. Like they could be a navy blue. And then the lines can do whatever you would want them to be. So those are some different things we need to discuss and talk about. It's usually a 1-week project. And for us, we would do it around July 4th, because that's when we usually shut down everything on campus anyways, for a week during the course of the summer, which Idaho High School Activity Association just recommends. For sports to get away and take a little bit of a break. So we sort of have a built-in time right there anyways to do it. And it's best to do it in the summer, just when it's hotter out. So definitely a need. It's wearing thin. It's one of those situations that, as we look at it, needs to be built into where every, like I said, 7 to 8 years, it's being done so the cost can be minimized. If not, it gets to be extremely expensive. Caldwell High School had to repair their entire, not just the track, but the surface underneath it a year ago, and I think that was close to $1 million project.
And we do have the funds for this project there are still funds remaining from the construction of the high school, can only be used for things that are up there at the high school. And so that fund is still available that we can use for track resurfacing such as this.
So you got the 2 proposals that you got, obviously they haven't, are these full bids?
No, these are simply below, so I could let Mr. D just have an idea of, and you all as well,
Yeah,
what it could cost.
but you're looking just between the 2 proposals, almost double.
Correct. The one outfit, the track doctor is local. He's here in the valley. Like I said, they've done work on a lot of tracks in the valley, a lot of tracks in the northwest. The other organization, one of their new sales reps just got a hold of me out of the blue. I recognized the last name. If you in the college football world, it's the last name Patino. So his brother was head coach at Louisville, right? This is one of the other brothers. So I called out of the blue and said, hey, thanks for this email. We are looking. What do you guys do? I think they operate a lot, they're not local, right? So they're operating at a national level.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that is why in particular the cost was there. I didn't get into it a whole lot. Just more than anything, I just wanted to get some costs to you all so you can be able to see the difference. And the track doctor is local, is out of the Meridian area, does a lot with the West Ada School District and other spots in the Northwest.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions and comments. I look forward to talking to you more in the future. I ran track here at Middleton, of course, back when it was cinder track, and ran 4 years. Was fortunate enough to even place at state, and then I ran 4 years of college track, and ran everything from the quarter mile to the 10,000 meters. So lots of laps on the track.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of different surfaces. Plus, I ran even open track meets when I was going to grad school up at U of I, and very familiar with tracks. But it is surprising how much it costs just for the resurfacing. Talking over $250,000. That's quite a number, or close to 400,000, I guess. But one question I had, and I know this came up this last fall when I was running for school board trustee position and talking to people, and then this is going to come up later in tonight's meeting about how do we get people more apt to vote for bonds and for more schools, and especially people that don't have kids in school and they own farm ground like I do, and they're concerned about taxes. And one idea I had in talking to people is making school facilities more available to the general public. And like when I was at NNU there in Nampa, our school track was open to the public for walkers and joggers. And of course, people were pretty respectful, and there were signs to use the 7th and 8th lane. And so it generally, I didn't see that it actually wore the track out any faster, because it's usually that first and second lane. That's probably what you're seeing that gets worn out. So while you're here, I was wondering what your opinion was as far as being able to open our track up to walkers and runners. And I know, like at Mountain Home, my daughter's a teacher at the Mountain Home School District. They even have the middle school open during the winter in the hallways so people can walk at night. Just ideas in trying to make the facilities more available to the general public.
Gotcha. Facilities in the building, like, one of the halls would be a discussion for someone else. When it comes to, I think one of the only things you need to look at is this. And it's not that hard to get on our track, even though there's fences around it. It's not that difficult. Is what would the volume be? And does that volume then start to, instead of resurfacing the track every 8 years or 9 years, whatever it may be, you have to resurface the track every 6 years. I don't know what to be told. That would be phone calls out to see what that is like. But the outside facilities are easy, for people to use. With an artificial field, though, that's something to also look at in that situation, because it's different than grass. There's just different ways to maintain it that are a little bit different that I potentially worried about. But the opportunity to get out and walk, yes, and I don't know if the greater question is, for years here, at least you can tell me if I'm wrong, if I feel, I know the middle school track seems to have always been open and available for that, to where the high school has not been since they built it.
And it's because of the turf, is it?
A lot of it's for the turf. I mean, every once in a while, I'll be honest, every once in a while I see some people out there that take their dogs out there. I'm like, so I stop my car, get out. Why? We can't have dogs out here on an artificial field, please. So there are some things there that we would really need to look at and discuss. My biggest concern would be the wear and tear of it, and would that cause us to have to redo the track sooner? It's one of those situations, I'm sure you guys have seen it, where you put in the poles, that swing out, that cover all of a sudden lanes 1 through 5, and you can only do stuff on 6 through 8. Okay, what's the cost of that? And it's not really the cost of that per se, but what's that look like when you have an artificial field?
Yeah.
It's one thing if it's a grass field, it's another thing if it's an artificial field. What does that parameter look like? From a, just from a supervision perspective, there is none, because you're outside, and it's coming, do this at your own risk, et cetera. And it's easy access potentially too. The other thing though with the high school is we tend to close all those gates, usually into the facility, especially if it's on the weekend, our custodians close it down at night. So that's also, there were people trapped in there, or certain times that people are able to come and do it. But I would want to make sure, if we ever go down that road, that we actually would do something where we can control legitimately, but if it is with those swinging arms, where we know people aren't running lanes 1 through 5, because those are the ones that do get worn out the most by weekend runners.
Yeah, and my experience was that most of the wear and tear on the track is actually caused by the steel spikes, isn't it?
I think a lot of it is.
Yeah, it's just natural. I mean, it's going to tear up the rubber. And there's nothing you can do about that. You have regulations about how big of spikes they can wear, but that's about all you can do.
That's sort of the natural, lifespan of a track, whatever that
Right.
7 to 8 years is. I think the big thing is that just having very specific procedures and regulations. You don't want to see kids on bikes out there, right? You don't want to see those different things.
Do we have cameras on that part of the facility? Just curious.
We do not have any that are
Like
at the
that,
football field, not like we do that show up to the parking lot, right? Not that we have this yet.
It doesn't seem that it would be very expensive to have a couple of Wi-Fi cameras out there with that. We're talking about $350,000, $60,000 to resurface that. Wi-Fi cameras seem like that'd be pretty cheap compared to the cost of maintaining the facilities to, just to help prevent vandalism out there.
Oh, yeah. And I have no idea. That'd be an IT question, but yeah.
So sorry, are you done? Okay, so this is only, the funds are bonded funds, not.
Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with supplemental levy.
Correct.
So at about 48K a year that either needs built, socked away, planned
Right.
for. If we've got that money to deal with it, what happens 10 more years from now, 9
Right.
more years from now?
Well, and that would be part of our conversation, and we'll have to have the same conversation regarding the artificial turf in terms of that, the continuing ongoing maintenance of that. So the artificial turf, we had a couple of years. The track, we felt like it just needed to happen pretty quickly in order to stay on top of things.
So if we had the money previously, why wasn't it done within the 7 to 8 timeline?
That's a great question. It was something that I have previously proposed and asked and let people know.
Okay,
did ask
I
you that.
wondered if it was a question that maybe couldn't be answered.
But why, I don't, I have no idea.
Okay, well, and then with the the two items,
Quotes.
quotes that we got, there is a difference in the warranty. What kind of warranty was on the track we have now?
I think it's similar to some of the ones you see with the track doctor. It's that
Yeah.
5 to 7 year.
I think his said 3.
this was
Yeah,
the-
and our turf field was I think when I was hired, we came in, there was 2 or 3 years left on that one. So, our turf field's no longer in warranty. Like before they'd come out and take care of all the repairs and stuff, that was part of it. Now I pay someone to come look at it in August to make sure it's ready to go.
Thank you.
Any more?
Any other questions for Mr. Ankin?
Well, the local company, is a lot cheaper. They should put that on the record. That's pretty, almost
Substantial.
almost $200,000 less.
Yeah, and out of curiosity, I've asked him previously for quotes, since he has come out and done stuff for us, and it's always been, a year ago, it's a little bit less than that, right? The prices have gone up, but it's always been in that ballpark. And the original question to him was just to see what it would even cost before I even went anywhere else with it.
So with a bid versus a quote, you get more information about what's going to be done and how it's going to be done and all that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
there are some requirements that Mr. Ankeny and Mrs. Krantz will work through there are some rules that we have to follow when we put out a bid in terms of putting it in the paper, the legal descriptions and things like that. And so we'll have all of that done.
So we may have other people that put in bids.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. And so all you're authorizing us to do tonight is to go out to bid. And that will be an action item later on in the meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Ankeny?
I look forward to talking to you more later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Andy. Appreciate it.
All right. We're going to move on to item C, update to safe return to school process, and that's going to be you,
Yep.
correct?
So we updated the safe return to school process after the break. And I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of where we were looking at based on, we look at a lot of different pieces, what's happening here in our community, We look at CDC, we look at Southwest District Health, but ultimately it's our school board that decides these things. But we had looked at pulling that from the 7-day and 10 days, 10 days out if you've been actually had the virus, and 7 days if you were exposed. Both of those have come down to 5 days, and that's based on national recommendations and things like that. But as we pull those down to 5 days, it'll adjust a little bit about what we see in reports. And so I just wanted to go through these charts, and you've got copies of these on your desk there. But this follows the case number of students. The top line is the total for the district. All those other lines are individual schools. And you can see that started from the end of August through December. You saw that slowly moving downward with cases that were reported to us. And with, as we've come back from the Christmas break, it started to climb a little bit. And we do anticipate that it's going to climb some more as the current variant moves through our community. But the number of students out due to COVID, thank you. You can see we had quite a few there at the beginning of September, and then that's gone down. And so we anticipate that will not go up nearly as high with the 5-day, the change to the 5 days. So more of our students will be in school more time as that goes through. Those were the primary changes to the plan. And then we did ask we asked people, as we put this out to all of our parents and put it on our website, and gave them an opportunity to ask questions. Only had 7 total people respond with any types of questions. One was concerned with that it wasn't enough, that felt like there should be more. The rest felt like, for the most part, that we were doing it right or not getting, there were a few that said just get rid of all of them. But again, we're talking 7. So no way to really say it's a representative sample. And there were a couple of suggestions that we'll pass on to the schools in terms of communicating when a student is out, of communicating with those students and their families about what they're missing and things that apparently there have been some holes in that regard. So we'll be talking about that again tomorrow morning I'll be having a principals meeting to review that. But other than that, it was just more to update you on where we were and what came of that survey. So any questions, concerns?
How are teachers hanging in there?
Yeah.
Mr. Neal, do you want to comment?
I think they're doing great.
Good.
We do too. We
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
And we do have several staff members out right now that have tested positive for COVID.
And how's our sub supply?
Do you want to speak to that?
So we watch it daily, we're pulling it weekly with those reports. We are seeing a little bit of a spike this week, but it's been interesting in watching the trend because a lot of times Thursdays are a big day for us. We have lots of subs at the end of the week, and we fill more on that day than we do on days where we don't have as many and don't fill as many. So we have a pool out there. It just really depends on what days they're available is what we're
Gotcha.
talking. So today we had more unfilled than we've had for a while. Tomorrow we have a PD day going on with the mentor-mentee program, but we've been able to fill all but 2 of those ahead of time, and that was 21 subs. So
Good.
we just keep watching it, monitoring it, but we're seeing, it's just interesting trends that we're seeing, but overall we're doing okay. We're hanging in there.
Good.
And the reports that I was sending out weekly previously that kind of filtered out as the cases petered out, I'm going to start picking those up again at the end of each week. You'll see a report from me that has these graphs for the week, as well as what's happening with our subs. And so you as a board will continue to see that.
Are these COVID, these are COVID confirmed cases?
Yes.
Okay.
COVID.
So, I mean, we're going to run in, it's cold and flu and crud season, and anybody that's got a kid that has fingers, has stuff jammed in their face, so, it doesn't seem like it's a crazy outburst of insanity.
Yeah, not yet. And we do anticipate things are gonna keep going, get it going up for the next few weeks, but, we think we're ready to meet that.
Yeah, a lot of colds and flus going around. I felt bad enough a few days ago. I actually got tested to make sure I
Yeah.
was sick here. I was
Right.
negative, but it was pretty bad cold. It was
Right.
going around.
And we've had several teachers report to us that they had the same thing and they've gone to get tested and come back negative, but they still stay home just so they don't spread that around either, so. Any other questions on that? Okay,
Thank you.
yeah,
On to item D, which is curriculum adoption assignments, and we'll have Mrs. Goodson.
yep, and just so the new board members are aware, Paige Goodson is our curriculum director. And so she'll go through the development cycle with you, so you understand that. And then we will need, chairman will need a volunteer of the board.
Yes,
And
you've all got that email.
I think I had one, Cindy
Did you?
mentioned to me that she was interested, so.
That would be awesome.
We have an ex-teacher on the floor.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic.
I was hoping you would.
A lifetime teacher.
So as I was
That
doing
is
this, I
true.
realized I'm giving you guys a different version of the CDC.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, there you go.
Something
A
different.
better version. Thank you.
Keep us on the edge.
So what I thought I'd do tonight is just give you an overview of the curriculum development cycle that we go through at the district. It is, where am I?
Well, I think you're on my screen.
There we go. When we look at the curriculum development cycle, it's aligned to the district strategic plan. And we're on that last year of that strategic plan. And really what it's supporting is that second goal, that we provide all students with equitable access to a rigorous curriculum. And so when we started this process in 2017 with our math adoption, this year we will end up completing that first cycle, or the first whole cycle with our CTE adoption. And I'll explain more about that here in a second. We break this out into 3 different phases of our curriculum adoption. So in phase 1, which is year 1, it's where we really review our curriculum. We select our materials, we look at what the state provides us, we get any additional samples that we need, and then our teachers review that, our steering committee reviews that, and then we present a curriculum for the board to adopt. Then we head into phase 2, where that's the second year, it's our first year of implementation, it's where we're getting into that curriculum and we're implementing it, and then in years 3 through 5, we're really monitoring that success and making tweaks as we need to. So if I put that in perspective for you of where that sits right now for the district. CTE is in phase 1 this year, so they're in a curriculum adoption. Our current programs and pathways are in adoption. Science is in phase 2. That's what we adopted last year, so they're in their first year of implementation. And then the rest of these content areas, math, health, PE, social science, humanities, and ELA are all in phase 3. So the exciting part and the thing to celebrate is the board's support of these curriculum adoptions to get our teachers the resources they need, because this will complete that first cycle in that regard. So when we look at the process that we use to adopt the materials, it really starts with that administrative commitment, and then we put a committee together, we review the materials. Again, we do our standards work with our teachers, and then we bring the proposal forward to the board to approve. So that is that curriculum resource adoption in a nutshell. But it's very exciting. We're very appreciative of the board's support for our staff and the hard work that they've put into this.
Any questions for Paige?
We did science last year, right? That was the one that we were like limping along for 20
Decades.
years, still making Model Ts and things.
Yeah, we had to put that on pause for a few years.
Okay, so we're kind of back on track and,
Other questions?
Paige, of course, you know, Cindy and I are brand new to the school board. Cindy's been a lifelong teacher. I was educated as a teacher, but I have been out of it for a while, so I apologize if I seem pretty naive, but what is CTE?
career technical education.
Okay. And
So we'll adopt for our current pathways and courses. So what that is right now is our marketing pathway, our culinary arts pathway, welding, horticulture, animal science, and then some of the cluster courses that those programs have.
oh, great. And I'm really big on having multiple pathways in VOTEC. I was really big at VOTEC when I was here at Middleton, so that's awesome.
It's exciting. Great teachers to work with.
Yeah, and that's all we called it back then, so different letters, different
Yes.
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you for asking for clarification on the teacher jargon.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
And then it would just be you as the
Do I need
chairman
to appoint?
assigning a board member to take that role.
Do I need to say that right now?
Yeah.
Gina, I'm assigning Cindy to be our curriculum
The resident expert.
guru. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Great.
And then Paige will get a hold of you as far as coordinating.
All right.
Okay.
On to E, proposed amendment to the negotiated agreement.
And that would be Lisa.
All right.
So as you guys, and just a little back history, we reopened negotiations with the teachers union prior to Christmas break. And so we had brought forward to you guys in December that first language change around those stipends previously. This would kind of finalize that round of negotiations. So we sat down with them again and then agreed to what you see in front of you, which is the one-time extra duty stipend for the 21-22 due to COVID-19. And so this language change just puts that into the agreement with those stipends being accessible to them, obviously in that December paycheck, February paycheck, and then again in the May paycheck as well.
And that's just certified, right?
Correct, yeah.
Guys have any questions?
You reopened it?
We reopened negotiations.
When did you close it?
So the way that worked is we negotiated earlier in the year and we came to an agreement that we brought to the board back in, I don't remember if it was August or September.
Well, if we go back even further,
Yeah.
there was a negotiations before I arrived.
Mhm.
And then there was,
And then we reopened again.
and then we,
Right.
this is the second time.
Legislation
Then we
needed to
finalized,
restrict it
yeah,
because
we
started
finalized
late.
August, September,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
For this school year
Yes.
currently?
Yes.
Oh,
And then
We
they
started
came
late
and
because of
requested to
legislation.
reopen again based on some information that they wanted to discuss with us. And so we agreed to reopen and then we brought the first suggestion of change to the board in December as the first part of what was agreed upon. And then this would be the second part of what we sat back down with them.
And I might say that that's not typical
No.
to have reopening of negotiations. Part of that was, my coming in new, and there were some things that they were waiting for me to come in to finish where there hadn't been consistency in the leadership role there.
Okay.
So the goal is not to have any reopening, but in these cases, we felt like it was appropriate to do.
How do these payments compare to other school districts?
So we actually very much aligned with
Okay.
them. We meet with the superintendents of other districts often, and so some of those conversations, and we looked through a table of what they were doing similarly, and it's very much in alignment with what other districts are doing.
Yeah, and just a word on that generally, because I went 12 years here to Middleton. We really felt like we were the redheaded stepchildren of the whole valley as far as we had generally, very bottom of teacher pay. And it even got so bad as for senior year, we had a teacher strike and then we had a student walkout and it was pretty ugly. And so, I have vivid memories of that. And one of the things I talked to people about again this last fall was, I really want this district to be competitive. I don't want teachers to feel like they have to make sacrifices to be in this district. And instead, I would like our district to have the best paid teachers really in the valley. I mean, that's my goal. And, and I'm talking about, I have to sell that to all my peer farmers that don't have kids in school and explain to them that their property taxes are going to go up, but it's going to be a great investment in the future. So I'm excited to see teachers get more money.
Thank you for sharing.
Any other questions on that? That will be an action item that we'll need to address at the end, just to approve that language.
Yes. We good?
Yep.
All right, moving on to school board training options.
So we've talked about with the 2 new board members coming in, and I don't believe there's been too much formal training for you as a group in the last several years. We had just talked a little bit previously that it now might be a good time to look at some training. And there are 2 different organizations that provide training for school boards. One is the ISBA School Boards Association, and one is IASA, which is the Administrators Association. Both of those have trained trainers that could come and provide that. And so more than anything, is there a preference of ISBA over IASA, and what time frame would we be looking at? Because both organizations have, can pretty much tailor the training to what the timing that you have and which topics you want to address within how the school board runs.
I think at ISBA, at the conference, we mentioned to one of the trainers that maybe it would behoove us to get with, say, Notice or some of the other places around here that have new school board members and just do a central training. The information is the same, the process is the same.
Right.
So might be worthwhile to investigate that.
Time frame, are you guys thinking?
Because you can do
be
the training.
interested?
Typically just so you're aware, typically when you do a training like this, you call a work session for the board. And so it still is open, but it's clear that this is training for the board that, and so you can do that. It doesn't have to be on any regular scheduled time. You can, as long as we post it and let people know that that's what's happening, that's the only requirement we have.
I don't have a preference. ISBA is fine.
ISBA or the
Like I
other?
say, the information's the same.
Go ahead.
I just don't know anything about it.
Yes.
What are you thinking?
I've been in both. One they had at a school board meeting,
Mhm.
and there were people out in the audience that,
Got to learn?
that heard what we were, or the
Yeah.
board at the time was being told, and
Okay.
given, they give out a handbook.
Mhm.
The IASA is also not bad, but it is more administrative type.
Well, and their trainers actually are focused on the school board. They're coming from a school board perspective. They've been hired by the association to do that. In
Oh,
fact, a previous trainer from ISBA is now working for IASA.
okay.
The only difference between the two is that the IASA has just a little bit different perspective when they start training regarding how the board interacts with the superintendent and vice versa, or with the principals and things like that. So either one could work. If there's no preference, I can work with Pam and say, here's what the options are, and then she can communicate with you what that would look like. But more than anything for them, we'll just need kind of a time frame, what you'd be looking at.
I just say generally, what I'd be a little bit sensitive about is if there's an organization that tries to tell me, what I can and can't do, I'll be a little prickly about that and be like,
It's more process than anything.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because there's proper protocol you have to do to bring things to the table and to pass them.
Sure,
And
yeah.
that's the biggest part of it.
And
But
do they talk about open meeting law
Yep.
and all that?
Mhm,
Okay.
sure,
Yep.
but my background being, where I'm going to research out what the laws are, what the statutes are, and see what my authority really is. If they talk about, constraints or boundaries of authorities, those sorts of things, or if it's even open meeting laws, I'm going to research those out, look at the laws, see what they are, compare. And, I just don't want them to be interpreting what the statutes are for me, because I'm going to be looking at those myself. But
And the ones that I've been through have typically been very policy and Idaho code
Mhm.
focus, where everything that they're going to give you has a corresponding Idaho code that you can then look at and make sure that that's
Okay,
where we're at.
I feel a lot more comfortable about that.
Okay.
So if that's all right, Pam and I will just work on that, and then we'll look at what their availability is and
Yes.
suggest some times.
Sounds good. That's like a day, 2 days,
You can make it
a
whatever.
week, your whole life.
Right. No, the experience I've had in the past, in other districts has been, if we had an hour, we'd say we've got an hour.
Okay,
And here's the topic we'd like to hit on. If we have 2 hours, if we'd like to do it an hour here and an hour there, it just depends on what we decide we can, as a board, can put the time in for.
very good. Thank you. Moving on to item G, we're going to talk about maintenance, custodial grounds, contracting update.
Yes. So, and this, again, for the new school board members, I'll kind of give you an idea of where we've been and where we're at in the process. As we began the school year, we had our maintenance supervisor retire. And in the process of looking both in my process of coming in and evaluating our facilities, grounds, and janitorial needs, as well as looking for someone to fill that role as the maintenance supervisor, we started seeing that there are just quite a few issues we were running into, primarily with personnel. We've had several open janitorial positions throughout the district all year, and we're seeing this everywhere, but it's an issue that we're running into, and looking for someone with the expertise to take on that maintenance supervisor role. As we were working through that process, we looked at what other districts were doing, and one of the ideas that some of the districts, Nampa, parts of Caldwell, Notice, Emmett, they were all looking at contracting out these services. Now, by contracting out, it's not that we're firing everybody here and they're bringing in somebody else. It's that we're contracting the service, and they'll use our people to work through. And so we approached a company called ABM. They are a maintenance company that has a national presence, but they're present here in Idaho. They're the ones that are doing it with these other districts that I mentioned. There's a national, they were on the national bid, the national bidding, what's that called?
National Co-op.
The national co-op, which means if we use them, we don't have to go out to bid because they've already bid within our state and within our organizations. So we looked at that and thought that was a possibility. At the beginning of September, we invited them to come and look at our facilities, look at our programs, see what they could offer us. When we did that, we did email out to all of our janitorial, maintenance, and ground staff to let them know. One, we wanted them to know that these people looking around, it doesn't mean that we've decided and we're moving this direction. We wanted them to be aware, but we wanted them to be aware that we were looking at this as well. They're the ones that are going to be the most affected by any decision that was made. So they came and did their visits. They worked directly with Mrs. Krantz to look at what we have been spending in terms of those programs. And right before Christmas, they presented a proposal that proposal fit within our financial range that we were looking, that we thought that's a reasonable range. The next step, and so that's kind of where we're at. That brings you up to speed. The next step we had, before we even brought the full proposal to the board, is we felt like we needed to meet with all of our staff and the representatives from ABM so that they could answer questions. There are a lot of concerns out there. Some of them are afraid that they're going to be fired, that they don't have a job anymore. Well, that's not the case. Some of them are afraid that they're going to lose their Percy. Well, that's not necessarily the case. We felt like we really needed to get that information out to them. So this Thursday, we're going to hold a meeting with all of our janitorial, maintenance, and ground staff. They'll come here. I'll be available, as well as a representative from ABM, and we will go through what it would look like. So, and we'll stay as long as they have questions. And then we'll provide a way for them to follow up with questions with us following that meeting. After we've gathered that information, I'll be sending you as a board the proposal that they've sent. Mrs. Krantz is double checking the financials to make sure that, you know, we kind of had set a range, but now that we have a proposal, we want to make sure that it's fitting within our budgeted expectations. So I'll be sending that proposal to you, as well as a summary of what our staff members are saying and what their concerns might be, questions that they had, and what those answers to those questions are. Because ultimately, taking on a contract of that size is that's not something that I can authorize. That'd be a board authorization to do so. And so I'll bring that information to our February meeting, and there will be a representative from ABM available on that day to answer any questions that you might have. But I'll get you that proposal as quick as I can, because it is pretty comprehensive. Any questions on kind of where we're at?
So ABM, you'll be here. Are we giving the staff that could be impacted some representation, just to make sure that?
It's with all of them.
Yeah, it's with all of them.
Okay.
Every member is going to be here. We're going to give them lunch, and
I'm talking about just at the board meeting, so they can ask.
at the board. Yes, I could arrange for that. In fact, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a great
I want to
idea.
make sure that they feel like their needs and concerns are being addressed.
Yep. Just going to make a note here.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too, for sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, that's all I have on that.
Thank you. We will move on to item number H, bond planning.
Okay, so the first, as we met in December, we had talked about the possibility of running a bond. We approved the levy, supplemental levy for the March election, and we talked about the possibility of doing the bond. And one of the primary questions was whether we had could we get everything done? And, you know, I believe there was a route that it could happen, but it really was going to be tight when we started looking at it. Because one of the biggest things, and I think it was Derek that mentioned it, was we've really got a responsibility to inform our community about what we're talking about. And because we're talking about that, because we felt like what we're going to propose is a little bit more than just we want to build a school, we felt like it would be important to take the time, especially where, you know, from today, the early voting is February 22nd, 42 days from now. And that's including weekends. If you take weekends out, you've even got a shorter window of time to work with people and help them. And then there's a lot of work we can do in terms of helping get people registered to vote and making sure that they're aware of their options. And we just felt like my recommendation to you as a board is that we look at the August date as a date to approach those facilities and bonds. And with that, I just wanted to go through, if we were to go in August, what the projects are that we're looking at right now. And we had talked a little bit about this, but I did get a little bit more details from some of our colleagues. The first and foremost is the elementary school, as we talked about before. The estimated cost of the elementary school would be $28 million. Then we also looked at the CTE center with the Middleton Academy being attached to that. The cost, we did get a cost estimate from Design West on that. of around 22.3 million for those facilities. And we'd be looking at actually moving our existing welding and woodworking to that building, as well as what they took into consideration. And these are the programs that would be there. It's just we needed to start with something. So the types of facilities they were including in that 22 million was computer tech and robotics lab, auto tech, diesel mechanics, shop and classrooms, construction shop and classroom, welding shop and classroom. Those would be repeats of what we currently have. EMS, which is emergency medical services, certified nurses assistant, and EMT. There's labs and facilities for those, law enforcement and fire, cosmetology, and as well as greenhouse. Now that would be in addition to administrative areas and the classrooms for the academy portion of that. And so that's kind of what they were looking at when we talked the 22.3 million. And that's, I mean, as we move into this, we can start putting more detail to that plan, as well as fine tuning that pricing range. Because if we looked at this and said, well, if we move those and we maybe we do the EMS up at the high school where it is, currently, because we can, as we move things around, those facilities might work better. If that's the case, then we take that piece out, and that's less of a cost. And so we will be fine tuning that over the next several months as well. Another reason to give it some time to get that worked out. And certainly these are ideas and things that we see as needs based on those surveys that we responded to. But if there's other thoughts that you have, that constituents that you're working with have, now would be the time to start getting those in. So we have the elementary school, the CT center and the academy. And then we had talked about the modernization and bringing Heights up to speed with some of the things that they're looking at, as well as outfitting it to be a STEM elementary. And when we're looking at that, the cost estimated there would be about 2.3 million. And that would, those are things like, for instance, the roofing needs to be redone. We're at the end of the lifespan for the roof at Heights. So that would be a piece to that. Fencing, drainage. There's some work that needs to be done with the elevator system there. We're having 2 stories, bringing some of the things up to code, ADA compliance issues, as well as refitting some of those classrooms to become more of a lab, hands-on type environment. So that's what we're talking about when we're looking at that modernization of Heights with the STEM addition. And then we had talked about the refurbishing if we create that CTE program and we pull the CTE programs that we have out of that extra building, as we move into 5A throughout the district, we'll be looking at needing additional athletic facilities, training facilities. And so that would be another place that we could use those facilities that are already partially being used for the athletics to update and improve those opportunities for our students. And so that would be look at just refitting some of that space to be an athletic center. And that would be around $750,000 to do that. When we look at the final thing that we had talked about, and some of these things are things, again, we're talking different projects that were being suggested through the survey, through conversations with us. Another one that came up was talking about updating facilities that are connected, that are school facilities connected to the rec center, and then including greater collaboration between the rec center and the school. And that was just another way that we could address some of the requests that had come in from the surveys, And that would looking at around 900,000. And so what you look at total, if you put all those together, is 54.25 million. And when we had met last time, we had talked about the fact that if you kept it at 50 million, you'd keep it under what our patrons are currently paying. I did ask the question of if we were to go right up to what our patrons are currently paying, what would be the amount that we would be able to bond for? And the answer came back at 56 million. So even keeping it at that 54.2, you would be keeping it under the amount that our patrons are currently paying. It's going to be a longer term, but also we have to remember that as the value increases, the cost for individuals goes down. And so that's something that we'll want to be able to communicate out as well. And I mean, even with our supplemental levy, the cost per $100,000 of personal property, you have, when we started our first year, that cost per 100,000 was $81. This current year, it's $61. And it's what we're estimating is that it would actually be down to 51 for the coming school year, for the new levy. And so, I mean, you're seeing that cost go down. The same thing is happening with our existing bonds. The cost per individual per 100,000 is going down as the values are going up. So those are some of the things that we'd be looking at. Questions on those projects, because we do have, we're going to talk a little bit about the funding and the timeline as well and the steps, but any questions just about those projects before I give the floor over to Piper Sandler to talk a little bit about the funding?
Know that we're far enough along to go super deep dive yet, because we
Right.
still haven't put the little people in the pictures.
Right, exactly. See, Eric, right there. So I'm going to give the floor over to Eric Henninger. He's from Piper Sandler, and that's who we've used in the past for our bonding purposes. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Superintendent Key. Eric Henninger, I'm with Piper Sandler. I worked on the district's bonds in 2008, the 2008 election. Probably started working in the district about 3 years prior to that, just getting prepared to plan out that bond election. I'm located in Boise. I know there's some new board members up here. I do a lot of work with schools in Idaho. I think I work with the majority of districts here in Canyon County, but I also work on bond planning for cities, counties, and other entities throughout Idaho. So if you want more background on me, I can deliver that. I know we have a short time. What I wanted to do is just give you some basics on bonds and levies as you start to think through the process of moving forward with the bond election and making those decisions, and some of the background information on the district's historical levies. Yeah, thank you.
It might be easier for you.
Yeah. So what I wanted to start with is just to identify the three different types of voted levies that a school district has. Because when we talk about a bond, it's different than a supplemental levy. And a lot of times there's this thought, well, if it's a vote for a school, it's a bond. But it's not. You have your supplemental levy that gets voted every couple of years to provide operating revenue for the district, whether that's additional programs, after-school programs, music, athletics, teacher pay, supplements, you name it. A lot of flexibility with what you do with supplemental levy money. Simple majority to pass. The money comes in through the tax collection cycle. So you see the cash flow from that levy at the end of January and end of July is the big payments that you receive from the county. I'm going to go to next the bond. So the bond is not necessarily a levy that provides ongoing dollars to the district like the supplemental. What the bond does is the vote authorizes the district to borrow money, to incur debt. So under the Constitution in the state of Idaho, no public entity can borrow money cannot go into debt beyond 1 year without a 2/3 approval from the voters. So with that 2/3 approval, though, comes the authority to levy a tax to repay the bond over time, principal and interest. So Bond, the vote allows you to borrow money up front. You get the money, you build the project, then you levy the property tax to pay it back, principal and interest. You can go up to 30-year repayment term on a bond in Idaho. Most districts use 20. In fact, there's only one district that's gone out longer than 20, maybe a couple, and that's to 25 years. We haven't seen a 30-year bond yet. There's a limitation on the amount you can bond for. It's 5% of your full market value. I'll give you that number a little bit later in the presentation. And this is what you use to build buildings and major remodels, things like that. There's two programs that are allowed at the state. Yes, thank you. Two state programs that benefit bonds, and that is the school bond levy subsidy. That's payments that the state sends to school districts to help offset the repayment cost on bonds. Middleton School District qualifies for a pretty high percentage, and I'll get into the details of that in a second. So that's a really important program that helps offset the cost of your bond to your taxpayers. And the other is the school bond guarantee, which is a credit enhancement program. It basically allows you as a school district to sell your bonds at the same credit rating or bond rating as the state of Idaho. So it's a big benefit for school districts. And I bring that up because a plant levy is another way to pay for capital items, but it doesn't qualify for those two programs. So when you do a plant levy, you can use the money more as a pay-as-you-go basis for capital projects, but there's no state offset or state subsidy that helps out with that. Districts can, you can get a plant levy approved. It's like the supplemental levy where you get the money kind of annually in two semi-annual chunks, really. And that money the maximum term on a plant levy is 10 years. The voter threshold for a plant levy can be as low as 55%. So there are districts that look to this as a way to provide for smaller capital projects, whether it's repairing roofs, HVAC systems, parking lots, repavement, things like that. So 3 types of voted levies. I think we were talking about bonds, and this is just an overview of this presentation. I'm sure you can distribute out. So just kind of a summary, putting those 3 types of levies side by side. Let's get into your levy history. So this is a slide that's got all the elections that the district has had since 2001, I believe. Yeah, 2001, the first bond election passed at almost 73%. You can see the supplemental levies were run annually, 2004 through 2008. The September of 2008 bond for the high school, one of the highest percentage passage rates that we've seen in the state. And you can kind of go on down and see what the history is. There was a rough patch there, obviously, between 2018 and 20. Bond elections didn't pass. The 2 supplementals didn't pass. That November 2018, there's 3 bonds there. The bond proposal was basically put into 3 pieces: elementary school, I think some safety, and then a technology component. I think those are the 3 components. Those were all wrapped into one bond in the prior March 2018 and August 2018 elections. But so data to look at and consider as you move forward. What that means is, based on those elections, you currently have, these are your property tax levies that were certified this year. Supplemental levy at 1.5 million. That expires this year. That's, I believe, this is the last year that you have that levy. With that, if you want to renew it, it needs to be renewed before September. So you got 3 election dates, and I think you're running in March.
In March, yep.
So that's there, 1.5 million, and I believe you're running at the same amount.
Yep. Same amount.
Plant levy, you don't have one. Bond levy, the bond levy this year was just shy of 4 million, 3,948,000. Your bond payments go out to fiscal year 2030. And I'll give you more of a debt profile in a second. You also have a small tort levy, 50,000. That's not a voted levy. That's a levy that you're authorized to certify. It's a small amount. You can only increase it by 3%, basically, per year. Superintendent Gee talked about your tax levy rates. So this top chart is a historical picture of what's happened with your tax levy rates. This is rate per thousand of value. So you can, I mean, what I noticed right away was in 2019, the tax rate was $4.45. This year is $2.25. So it's almost half of what it was three years ago. It topped out at $5.25 back in that 2014-15 timeframe. If you go way back before the state changed the funding formula or the way schools were funded, and they took the regular property tax off the tax rolls, the tax rates were at $7.29. Now, on the bottom, you can see what the dollars, this is the tracking the dollars that have come in terms of total per year. So the dollars actually, even though the tax rate was going down, the dollar amounts coming in were going up. And that's because your market value is growing at a higher rate than the dollar, than the increase in the levy. But what's noticeable here, or notable, is in 2021 and 2022, your actual dollars levied is less than in 2020. So you're levying lower dollar amount, and you didn't levy any more this year than you did last year. So if you think about that, even though market values for existing homes are going up substantially, we all know that, but there has been new construction. There are new taxpayers getting added to your base to help pay that same dollar amount. So I would submit that most taxpayers are paying a little bit less to the school district this year than they did last year because there's more taxpayers. Does that make sense? The next chart, we talked about growth, unbelievable. I mean, these are numbers that are pretty shocking to me to see the last 4 years, your growth percent, your market value, taxable market value has grown 22%, 24%, 15%, and then this year 33%. And we saw big numbers all around the state for this year, but that's one of the bigger numbers I've seen. So I mean, clearly there's lots of growth in Middleton, but there's also a lot of that is the revalue of existing property. It's people's assessment values going up, but certainly a lot of it is new construction as well. Another way to look at tax rates is where do you kind of fit with your property tax rate in the Treasure Valley. So you've got Emmett at the low end and Notice at the high end, and Middleton, you're in the lower half at $225 per thousand tax rate. That's, you used to be middle of the pack, if not higher half in the Treasure Valley. So your tax-based growth is driving that tax rate down. Another way to look at the tax impact what I tried to do here is I just went to Zillow and I got the home value on Zillow for Middleton as of January 1, 2019, 2020, and 2021, because that's, you get assessed based on your value of your property as of January 1 of the tax year. So the home value in 2019, $268,000, according to Zillow, median home value. Homeowner's exemption, $100,000. Taxable value, $168,000. Tax rate at the time was 0.00394, also known as $3.94 per thousand. So you do the math, and that tax bill on the median home was $662. So home value, let's just go to 2021, $366,000, big increase in market value. Homeowner's exemption's gone up to $125,000 max, so your taxable value is now $241. Tax rate much lower, 0.00225. The tax bill and median home value has dropped to $542. Now everyone's is going to be different, but this just gives you a picture of what that trend looks like. Nobody likes paying property taxes, and there's been a lot of discussion around the state about the property tax burden, but yeah, that's real data for Middleton. Debt capacity. So I talked about your debt capacity is based on 5% of your full market value. So when you're talking about a bond, one of the first things you kind of check in on is how much debt capacity do I have? In 2008, the district barely had enough debt capacity to do the high school project. In fact, going into that in 2006, it looked like you wouldn't have enough debt capacity legally, based on this formula to do the high school project. The previous superintendent actually lobbied to get the formula changed to full market value instead of taxable market value. And so now your debt capacity is based on 5% of your full market value. So when you add back the homeowner's exemption. So it's just a calculation. So we take 5%, 3.2 billion, roughly 160 million is your total debt capacity. Right now, you've got 27 million outstanding. You subtract that, you get an offset for how much you're gonna pay off this year. Bottom line, today, you could ask your voters to approve 135 million. I don't think you're gonna do that. This is legal debt capacity. Practical debt capacity is what you can pass at 2/3. So that's just to make sure that you're well within your limit. In terms of your current debt profile, all of these bonds are bonds that were sold as part of that 2008 election. Those bonds got sold not all at once, but over a period of time. We use some really great programs that have reduced the interest cost for the school district and your taxpayers that came out through, after the financial crisis hit. There were these American Recovery and Reinvestment Act programs that we took advantage of and sold bonds over a period of time. But bottom line is you can look at your debt profile. This is the chart here that shows your annual payments are a little bit, just slightly above $4 million out through 2025. And then it drops a little bit and then it's fully paid off in 2030. There's just a small little tail of bonds you have out there. Really, very modest debt profile. You can pay off within 8 years on all your debt. This is the historical bond levy amounts. We kind of tracks what we saw earlier with the dollars that were coming in historically for all of your levies. Most of that money kind of came in to help fund some reserves in the bond fund. So your last 2 years, you lowered the bond levy to 4 million. It's been that number for this year and last year. Now, I know I don't want to take too much time here, but one thing that's really important is this levy equalization program. This is that subsidy I talked about when the state, if you pass a bond, school district passes a bond, the state doesn't give you money directly for school construction. But they do say, you sell your bonds, you build your school, we will calculate, there's a formula to calculate how much annually the state will pay in a subsidy to the district to offset what you need to levy locally. So it's money that goes to pay bonds, goes directly into your bond fund. It can't be used for anything else. And what it is it calculates this percentage of the principal and interest that the state will subsidize. Right now, the current subsidy percentage is 24.5%. So 24.5% of your bond payment is paid by the state. Think about that if the state was paying 24.5% of your mortgage, right? That's what that means. And it's added up. It's 16.1 million in state dollars that have come in to pay back that high school bond. So that's an important component going forward. We can go in, I'm gonna pass it. If you guys want to know how the subsidy works, I'll explain it, but maybe we can save that for another time. I think what I really want to get to is show you kind of this concept that Superintendent Gee talked about with being able to keep the dollar amount, the same and add a roughly 50 million or $55 million bond. So this is what your debt profile looks like net of those subsidy payments. So your current levy is $4 million for your bond, roughly, right? Your current bond payments are roughly $4 million, but you're getting about $1 million of subsidy from the state. So net, what you need to levy is $3 million. So what that leaves is a gap of about $1 million where you can add payments on a new bond. And then once the old bond is paid off, backfill. Because when you do a bond, you don't have to make it like a level payments, principal and interest. You can do less principal paid off on the front end to fit within your existing debt and just create an overall level amortization for all of your bonds. And I'll show you an example of that here. So this is 50 billion. This assumed an election in March of 2022, but the same analysis would work if you had an August election. The blue bars didn't change. That's the net payments on your existing debt, like you saw on the last slide. And then those dark gray bars are kind of where we structure the bond payments on the new $50 million bond. So you can clearly see those bond payments are a lot less in 2023 through 2029, and then we backfill. And that line that's going across the top is basically, the revenue line at 4 million. So idea is you're at 4 million now, stay at 4 million, and you can amortize this new $50 million bond with that $4 million annual levy, along with your existing debt. And because there's a little bit of additional capacity there, or white space, that's why we can say, yeah, you could go up to 55 million, 56 million, and not go beyond 20 years.
And that's not even accounting for future growth.
No. So I would submit that you would still see people's tax bills go down if you kept the payments at 4 million, and any kind of new construction coming in would help offset the tax burden to the existing taxpayers. So I think it's a pretty conservative way to look at it. Can I go to the next slide real quick? So this is the data that when you do get to the point where you want to run the bond, you're going to have some debt disclosures. And one of the things is we have to talk about what's the estimated interest rate, what's the estimated amount paid back over the life of the bond, and then what's the impact, average annual impact to the taxpayer per 100,000. I want to show you this because it's 50 million of principal. The interest cost on a 20-year bond would be roughly 15 million. But those levy equalization payments are actually a little bit more than the interest cost we're estimating right now. Two reasons. One, interest rates are really low. So that subsidy, that percentage, that 25% subsidy is picking up all of your interest costs and then actually a little bit of principal. So that's a pretty strong selling point, in my opinion, that you can go out and get 50 million and then only have to levy roughly 49 million to pay it back because the state effectively is picking up all the interest costs. So that's a selling point that Home Deal used on their last bond pretty strongly because they had a similar situation where their subsidy was going to pay more than the interest cost. So we get to talk about that $49 million number divided by 20. The average annual payment is $2,450,000. And if you divide $2,450,000 into your current market value of $2.4 billion, the estimated average annual cost per 100,000 to the taxpayer is $100. So we just talked about how this wouldn't increase, the tax bill, but this is a required levy. If I go back to the previous slide, it's a required disclosure that came about from House Bill 626 from the 2018 legislature. It says that we are required to use that formula specifically to come up with the cost per 100,000. That's to let the taxpayer know, hey, it's not free, right? If you don't pass the bond, your taxes are going to go to zero for the bond, right? So it is a mathematically true statement, but the more important thing, I think, the message that I think the district would want to try to get across is, right now you're paying X. If the bond passes, you'll pay X. It'll be the same number. And so we have this disclosure that we're required to use that says the estimated average annual cost of the taxpayer of the proposed bond levy is a tax of $100 per 100,000 based on current conditions. Now, we can also say, it's an optional addition to say the district's average annual levy for its existing bonds is expected to decrease by $100 per 100,000. Therefore, the tax cost per 100,000 is not expected to change. So that's the message that we're trying to tie into this required language, because it's a little tricky. If we don't add that language and you say, hey, this thing is not going to cost any more than what the current bond's costing, and then you see this disclosure when you go to vote, and you say, it's going to cost me $100 more, that's not what they told me. So we just you need to be aware of that, and there's some things we can do to talk about how to offset that and make it as clear as we can. Okay. Interest rates are low. There's a little bit of upward pressure right now in interest rates. I say that because all of those numbers are based on what the numbers we ran for the district back in December. When you get to a point where you're getting serious about running the election, we're going to need to update, and the rates, today they'd be higher than what, we're showing on that previous slide, but, they don't have to go up in a straight line. So just be aware, rates are volatile, and they can certainly change. Some more data on historical elections. 2021 was a pretty good year in Idaho for bond elections, for school bond elections. I think there were 7 that were run, 6 of them passed. 2020, no bonds passed. We had pretty tough years in 2018 and 2019. So hopefully we're seeing this trend continues. The other thing to be aware of is the which election dates have been most beneficial for passage rates, so in March. And so we got two things here. The line that's going across is showing the number of bonds run, which is the right-hand axis. And then the left-hand axis is showing the percentage of those elections that were run that actually passed. So 55% of the bonds that were run in March have passed, going back to 2011. 42% of the bonds run in May have passed, 36% in August, and 22% in November. So that's not to say August is a bad date. It's just that, that's the data. And most school districts look to run in March because it's school's only election date. August is the other school's only election date where you don't have other things that are, clouding whatever the election might be. Okay. I don't think I finished under 20 minutes.
You're
I might give you some food for thought. I didn't go super deep, kind of broad, give you some things to think about. And, sometimes you need to hear these things 3 or 4 or 5 times so, before they sink in. So I'm happy to come back and review this with you again.
Any questions for Eric?
Appreciate it.
Good information.
Thank you.
And Eric, do you mind introducing Brandon?
Oh, I'm sorry. Brandon Helgeson. He is a bond attorney. So I'm a finance person. So I basically do the financial side of things as a bond underwriter, number side. Your bond attorney firm has been Holly Troxel for many years. They're the ones who are going to advise you on the legal aspects of that ballot language and meeting all the requirements to get the bond authorized. When it passes, they'll also help you with all the legal requirements for selling the bonds. That's
Want to come out and introduce myself to all you guys. Like Eric said, we've been on council for the districts. We're also ones that are working for the district. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to do that in the future. But I just wanted to introduce myself, say hi, and get some new district members as well.
Are you Eric's brother? Are you related to?
Son.
Oh, you're son?
Yeah.
Eric and I grew up together.
Oh, really?
It's a football.
Yeah.
All sports.
Oh, yeah.
Helgi and I grew up together. Nice.
Nice to meet
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
okay.
Very good.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to just really quickly touch on is if we went for an August, what that timeline would look like. Would you mind bringing that up? So there would be some steps we would take, but if we're not gonna go through each one of these items here, but some of the key dates that we would be looking at, obviously, we would need in June, if we were gonna go for August, just like right now we have a deadline, we would have to be doing it right now to get it on the March.
Mhm.
June is that time frame for the August election. And so we would be looking to adopt that levy resolution, the bond levy resolution in June, if we were to move forward with an election in August. And then the actual election date is August 30th. And so basically what we'd be looking at is from like February to March, we would be doing we'd be fine tuning the projects and putting out surveys to our registered voters. We want to know what the registered voters would say about each project. Because let's say that we've got those 5 projects on there, and let's say they just hated the all of these were going to pass except refurbishing the current facilities into an athletic center. Well, then we might want to consider dropping, before we go to the bond, we might want to consider dropping that athletic or, whichever. The only one I think we really absolutely couldn't drop is that elementary. I think that if we were dropping the elementary, some of these others don't make any sense to continue with. But putting that information out, getting some feedback so that we can go in with a little bit more confidence that, that specific project with our registered voters would be successful. The other thing would be is trying to encourage our parents, the parents of our students, to register to vote during that time as well. And then once we've got that in place, Then starting April to May, we'd be looking at holding a lot of different meetings. And we do kind of a combination. There'd be a few larger venue meetings, but not a lot. The majority of them would be smaller meetings where we're gonna go to somebody's home. That person's gonna invite 10 people, 10 people they know, to where we can really have conversations about what's going on. And we feel like that's gonna be a really good way of helping our community know. Because I think you would all attest to the fact that you're gonna trust your neighbor a lot more than you're gonna trust me as the superintendent. I mean, I think I'm trustworthy, but all the same, you just know your neighbors. And if your neighbors are talking to you about things, it just makes a difference. And so we want to make sure that people have that as much information as possible and we can answer their questions. And so we would look to do most of that before school got out in May. And then we'd be looking at, we'd take care of some of those legal issues in June and July. And then as soon as August hit, we'd ramp up that again, because you'd already laid the groundwork in April to May to get that going. And then you've got a month to remind people to get out to vote, to remind people what those projects are. People are gearing up to get back to school. There's a lot of excitement around school at the beginning of the school year. And I think we'd be in a good position to move forward. And as we've talked with some of some of the other local superintendents, some of the folks that have gone through this process before, both here in Middleton and in other districts, that seemed to be the one that the timeline that had the fewest areas of concern. Because obviously, as Eric showed, that March date is a great date historically. But if we don't have the information out, it doesn't matter how great the date is. And so we felt again, I think I said this before, but that May date where the primary being held, we feel like that'll be a very contentious primary season. And it's just, when there's a lot of contention, sometimes the message of the district gets lost in there. And so trying to avoid that May date so that the message is clear would be what we'd be looking at. Questions on that timeline in general? Okay. And so timeline steps, those are kind of together in that. So if you're comfortable with that, what I'll come back to you with in February is probably a proposal for some surveys. Some of these surveys to do it through a registered voter and have, the kind of results official results we need will have some cost to it. And so we want the board to authorize that as we move forward. And then we would take the next, that's going to give us a set of information that we can review in board meeting, and then we can make our next decision based on that. Sound acceptable?
Yes, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to policy review.
I'm going to just hand that over to Lisa.
Okay.
So just for a little history, we had not updated quite a few of our policy sections in quite a few years. And then last year we went through, I think it was 3 or 4 of those sections and trying to get those updated. Some of the policies you see before you tonight are out of the sections that we have not gone through that same process with and updated the entire section. And so what we're finding though, obviously, is some laws have changed. And so these are out to date as far as what we need to be in compliance with the law. So when you look at the first one, policy 1200, obviously, trustees are now elected in November and then sworn in the January meeting. So we just needed to change those dates so it aligns with law. So that's the change with that one specifically. Nothing else in that policy changed as far as what we're proposing. And then when you look at policy 410 and then 4210 and then 4210P, what we're doing there, we've communicated a little bit, is we're really trying to work on that rental facility policy so the community has more access, really trying to build some of that up. When we look at our current policy, we continue to work on it, but we're really trying to muddle through that, and it's becoming pretty convoluted as we're trying to adjust it. So we did work with ISBA, and they had some updated policies that we're bringing in as a first reading. We feel like it it's probably better to just start from scratch
Mhm.
with those policies, because it's gonna give us some of that flexibility to really make it community oriented the way that the board has asked us to look at it. And so 4210, 4210P would be the start of new readings there with the ISBA policy. And then we can talk about the old policy when we get to the next. And then when you look at policy 7100 and 7110, on those, we had an old policy 7010, and the dates in there, once again, didn't align with some of the new election. And so we needed to look at that, and what we found in the update to that, if you look at the last revision of it, it was 2003. And so what we found with the update is there's two separate policies now that would align with the verbiage that was in this old policy. And so that would be 7100, 7110. And so we're bringing those as an updated version of what our old 7010 would have been.
7010.
And it would then make sure we have all that verbiage still in policy that we're required to have when it comes to that.
And then if I can, for our new school board members, we'll typically go through 3 readings of a policy. So the first time, these that are in the first reading, you're gonna be able to see 2 more times before we move it into an actual district policy. First time around, it's, you know, if there are questions, if it's, could we look at this, could we look at that? Between now and next meeting would be a great time to communicate with myself or with Lisa to say, hey, here's a question I have, could we look at this? And then the second policy will come with those adjustments made. If there are additional fine tuning that needs to be done, we do that between second and third. Sometimes there's no changes, you're fine with it. But the law says for a new policy, it absolutely has to go through 3 readings. If the policy wasn't there before, it has to go through. If you had the policy in place before, law says you can do it with just 1 reading. Best practice is to go through 3 readings just to give yourself time to do that. So unless there's a real rush to get a policy updated because of some situation, in most cases, we're gonna roll those through 3 readings, just so that you're kind of aware of that process. That helps. Thank you.
And then just going back to policy 4210 and 4210P, if you'll get eyes on that and just let us know if it's heading in the right direction of what the board was recommending. We felt like it was a closer fit to what we're trying to work on the other one. So just any feedback on that to ensure it's working in the direction you guys had anticipated.
And just, it really speaks to what you were speaking to before as far as getting the access to facilities, trying to make sure that Middleton groups, Middleton students, Middleton organizations that are nonprofit organizations are able to use our facilities with minimal cost. There are some situations where we're having to hire somebody to come in to help a group, like, let's say in the auditorium, to run the equipment. Well, in those cases, regardless, we'll probably ask for a small fee, but just to cover the cost of that person coming in. Other than that, we're trying to make sure that we're getting as many Middleton groups able to use the facilities if the school is not already. So that was kind of one of the goals we were working towards.
That's all for first readings. Would you like me to go ahead and talk about the third reading?
Yes, please.
As well? So when you get to that third reading, 9010 was the policy we had in effect, and it was last revised in 2012. We had tried to work through some revisions to better align with what we had talked about earlier. And so you'll see that in yellow there. At this point, it's under its third reading. If the board takes no action, it's going to fall off, and then we can start moving forward with those other policies if that's what the board chooses to do as far as the rental facility piece goes.
Which is what we were hoping for it to just fall off, right?
Right. Because the
4210 and 4210P are good replacements. I do
Correct.
like what I see.
Correct. So just taking no action, it still stays as policy until you've approved these others.
Okay, very good. Okay. So with that, is there any more questions? Lots of reading for you guys to do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to
We
our,
need to do the action for the policies,
okay,
just as the policy for the first reading and then nothing for the third.
and when we go to action items. I don't have that on there though.
Yeah, it's typically the first
Sorry.
reading, it's inherent in
So then I need to look for a motion
a motion for the first reading.
for the first reading. I'm looking for a motion.
And we just need to list each number.
Move to approve
Yeah.
first reading.
Yep.
Move to approve the first reading of policy 1200, policy 4210, 4210P, 7100, and 7110.
Second it.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Yeah, carries 5-0, Gina. Now we're ready to move on, right?
Yes, unless anybody wants to do anything with that third reading.
Anybody?
Just let it.
Okay,
flounder.
good. Let's move on. Action item A, approve or deny the MHS track resurfacing proposal or the RFP proposal, the request.
And this is just.
That's to go to-
That's just to allow us to have them come, yep, give us an actual bid.
RFP's request for proposal, which is for a bid.
So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and approve, the sending out to bid for the proposals for the resurfacing of the track.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Say aye.
All right.
Aye. Carries 5-0. On to B, approve or deny proposed amendment to the negotiated agreement. I would entertain. a
Move
motion.
to approve the proposed amendment to the negotiated agreement.
Second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 That carries 5-0. Do we need to have a motion to adjourn?
No, because.
We have a hearing of signed in.
Oh, the hearing, sorry.
Hello.
This
But
is a
there are
long
none.
meeting, okay?
But there are none tonight.
There are none. Well, thank you for coming and listening and enduring almost a 2-hour meeting. We appreciate it. We appreciate the new board members. We also appreciate the old board members. Just appreciate all the hard work everybody does. Hopefully, we will keep moving forward. Do we need to have a motion
You
to
do not,
adjourn?
you can just say we are adjourned.
We are adjourned. Have a good night.
Thank
Thank you.
David,
I just
I
got
just want to
confused
introduce
because
the two of you to
I went to
David.
the
He's
city
our
council meeting. They made a
education